Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Monday, the 16th of June, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
This government, frankly, did nothing. Our priority all along was to, and it continues to be, to deliver justice for the victims and their families and get to the bottom of what happened.
So we've got a grooming gangs crackdown incoming. Apparently, the government has ordered a sweeping police operation to hunt down abusers alongside a national inquiry. But will the victims finally get justice? We're expecting the landmark Casey review any minute.
Well, victims and survivors, campaigners and families are approaching this week with cautious optimism. Will they get the justice they deserve? Later in the programme with Bev and Andrew, we'll be joined by Maggie Oliver, the campaigner from Rochdale, and two survivors to share their views on this upcoming national inquiry.
Is Britain in decline? A new poll suggests that most of us think it is, with over 3/4 worried about the rise of political violence and unrest.
£44 million. That's right, lost in just 1 year. We're going to go behind the scenes to see how crime is devastating Britain's farms. As if the farmers can take any more pressure. Can anything be done to stop it?
Can he explain how more expensive childcare is good for the economy or for working families struggling to make ends meet?
Barriers to business with childcare costs rising and mums locked out of work. Former Apprentice star Michel Nizio says tax rules need to change. Is it time for childcare to be expensed for the self-employed?
And sole survivor story. Vietnam Airlines flight 474 crashed into a mountainside during a cyclone in 1992. But one woman, Annette Herfkens, survived 8 days alone with no food and only rainwater. How did she endure this? And what might her thoughts be on the Air India survivor from last week?
Blood, sweat and sacrifice, the stuff success is made of, but in today's Britain is striving to get ahead something to be celebrated or something to apologise for. We're going to debate that.
A bit of Rocky Balboa there to start the day.
Absolutely.
If you're listening on the radio, of course, that was Sylvester Stallone running there, racing for the finish line. And we're asking in this country, is it that kind of determination and success? People don't want it anymore, do they?
No, but we need it, don't we?
We need it.
We do. Love to hear what you think.
Yeah, sorry. GBNews.com/your say it's going to be a very busy morning. And, you know, we're waiting on that Casey report as well. And as soon as we get it, Charlie Peters will be going through it and bringing it to us here in Britain's Newsroom. First, though, here's your news with Tatiana Sanchez. It's great that we've got Maggie Oliver.
Louise Casey into grooming gangs.
That's after the Prime Minister says the findings convinced him to announce a full-scale national inquiry. Sakir is under increasing pressure to apologise after he U-turned over the weekend, previously resisting calls for a national inquiry. That comes as Pakistan is demanding its national airline is allowed to fly directly to Britain in exchange for taking back convicted rapists. Elsewhere, strikes by Israel and Iran continue as the conflict between the two countries intensifies. 5 people have been killed in Iran strikes across central Israel overnight, with dozens of people injured, according to Israel's National Emergency Service. Israeli media reports that they were Ukrainian nationals. They included children. Yesterday, Israeli strikes killed the chief of Iran's Armed Forces Intelligence Unit. There are reports that the US president rejected a plan by Israel to kill Iran's supreme leader. It comes after the Home Office advised against all travel to Israel, and a red alert saw an Israel-bound flights cancelled. Donald Trump has promised an imminent ceasefire between the two nations, but Israel says it has no intention of peace while strikes are ongoing. And G7 allies will discuss the Israel-Iran conflict as well as the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Leaders will be discussing the prospect of more sanctions on Russia if Vladimir Putin continues to resist calls for an unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine, Sakir Starmer has said. The Prime Minister said targeting Moscow with further action would undoubtedly, he said, form part of talks at the international summit this week, unless the Kremlin engages in peace talks. Ukraine's President Zelensky is expected to attend the conference in Canada, where leaders from the world's major economies are meeting for talks on global security. Zelensky has accepted a US-backed ceasefire proposal and offered to talk directly with his counterpart in Moscow, but the Russian leader has so far shown no willingness to meet him. Those are the latest headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom. Andrew and Bev. A Monday morning. We are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning. Are we not, Andrew Pearce?
I don't know about bushy-tailed, certainly. But we are talking, of course, about yet another U-turn by this government, which specialises in U-turns. We've had winter fuel. We're going to get a U-turn for sure on lifting the cap on two-child benefit. But we had the big U-turn at the weekend on grooming gangs. So as recently as January, Labour MPs were whipped to vote against a national grooming inquiry. I think the majority was 350. But Baroness Casey's report is going to be published today. That was set up by Starmer's government, of course, to look into grooming gangs. There was a vote due in the Commons on Wednesday on grooming gangs. Labour were probably going to vote against it. Saved by the bell. The Casey report comes out in time. We're now going to have grooming. Does Starmer's lot believe in anything? This is all, in my view, because of Reform's success in May.
And arguably Charlie Peter's success.
And Charlie Peter's done a brilliant job.
Who we're going to be talking to in just a moment. The thing is, I've always been a little bit torn about this because what I really detest are 10-year inquiries that cost tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of pounds, when actually what you really want is for all the bad guys and all the people who've covered up the bad guys to get their collars felt and get banged away.
Well, nobody, of
Call me
course,
old-fashioned.
so far, nobody has lost their job or been prosecuted for the manifest failure of these young white, and they were girls.
Absolutely.
Were girls.
And so that's the only thing, and I want criminal investigations.
Well, the inquiry could lead to that.
But, I mean, how long is it going to take? 10 years? What, they'll all be either dead, some of these old guys that were committing abuse, or they'll be out of their jobs anyway, and what will it matter? That's my worry.
And, of course, Baroness J did a report into child abuse generally, and there was a section on grooming gangs, but the critics of the J report say there wasn't enough done on grooming gangs.
My understanding about the recommendations now is that the National Crime Agency, the NCA, will be involved, and they will... By all accounts, they have been doing a very good job with the local inquiries. But shall we... the Prime Minister's under pressure, of course, massively under pressure to get this sorted out. Charlie Peters joins us now. Right, Charlie, great to see you this morning. Explain to us... We've done a little bit there in terms of how we've got to this point. But what is your very personal take on this? Because you've dug deep into this story and you've been calling for this national inquiry. Do we really need one? Explain to me, as somebody who's a bit cynical of very long and expensive inquiries, why we need this to happen.
Well, let's hope it's not very long. I think it should be time limited. 2 years would be ideal.
Limited, ideally.
Well, I think the cost should be whatever they're needed to get the justice that's required. If that means millions to convict thousands, then let's have it. When it comes to why so many people think this national inquiry is required, there have been localised inquiries, but this is not a localised issue. These are national, organised criminal gangs marauding between towns and cities, trafficking girls as they traffic drugs from Plymouth to Glasgow. Now, 2 years ago, we found 50 different towns and cities. I bang on about it every time. But I think it is one of the most devastating findings when we look at how this country tackles organised crime and child exploitation, because when we've had resistance to this demand for a national investigation, people have said, as you said, Andrew, we've already had the ICSA inquiry, the Baroness J report. But as you said, it was a subsection of a sub-report, and they looked at grooming gangs. They looked at 6 areas, none of which had this pattern of abuse that we've recognised in over 50 different towns. So we need to join the dots. We need to link all these areas together to find the consistent themes, the drivers behind this particular pattern of offending, to understand the cultural, societal, ethnic and religious reasons why this sort of abuse has happened all over the country for so long, and also to understand why authorities didn't do enough to tackle it. For so long, I think we've misunderstood this. We've said that people didn't do it because they were scared of being called racist. I think actually that's true in some sense, but it's a cop-out. A lot of these people were corrupt, and they knew what was going on, and I think in some tragic cases, they were directly involved. I am really looking forward to people who didn't do enough, and those who knew what was going on and actively colluded in it, being dragged in front of a judge with powers of arrest to face questions for their failures.
Because that's the point, Jack. Nobody has been held accountable.
That's right.
Nobody's lost their job. Nobody's been prosecuted.
People have resigned when they've wanted to, but we had Operation Linden. I think this is a key investigation we've had previously, which is the Independent Office of Police Conduct. When they looked at Rotherham, they got 40-odd officers found guilty of gross misconduct. The strongest punishment was a written warning. These are officers who knew what was going on, were accused of facilitating the abuse in some manner, and I hope there's going to be more on that coming out shortly, and I look forward to breaking that news when we can. And also, we've had officers in that South Yorkshire town who looked the other way when this was going on. Written warning doesn't cut it. These people should be dragged before judges.
And you know, one of the things that shocked me reading about this at the weekend, Charlie, was a young woman, she's now a young woman called Jade. She had taken another girl from the home she was in to one of these terrible houses where all this sex abuse was going on. She was carted off to the police, has a record, is now on the sex offenders register, so can't take her children on school outings. The nasty, perverted rapist, the 60-year-old Pakistani man in this case, wasn't prosecuted at all.
She was arrested.
How was she? How was she anything other than a victim?
The police officers saw these girls as troublemakers and wanted to get rid of them rather than dealing with the perpetrators. Now, you might say, oh, it's because they didn't want to be accused of racism. I think in cases like Jade's, and I'm very happy to say that Jade will be joining us on GB News at 11 o'clock this morning, I think they didn't want to do that. And it goes further than just they wanted to look the other way. There's a reason why you don't arrest a 60-year-old man who you know is abusing a child. And I think there are so many other cases that we need to look into where people knew what was going on, and it's not just because they were scared of being accused racist. They were scared of greater links between authorities and these gangs being revealed. That's going to be the real shocker. We need to look at the driver of cousin marriage in this issue as well. The links between kinship. Why do family members protect each other? Now, generally speaking, our layer of kinship is between our immediate family. But imagine if your cousin is a grooming gang abuser and you're in a local council. If you have greater senses of loyalty, you may protect them in that sense as well.
I was listening to the BBC reporting this story this morning, and you may not be surprised to know that they were arguing that most sexual abuse happens in families where you know the abuser. They were trying to deflect away from the cultural argument. Just explain to people who might be on board with that notion, Charlie, why this matters.
Well, this is a very specific form of child sexual exploitation. And as you're saying, Bev, when people talk about it, they have this tendency to zoom out. Like we've always heard previously about, you know, all forms of racism. This is a bit like all forms of child abuse. Actually, when you're focusing on this, you need to do it with a rifle shot, not a scattergun. You need to look at this very specific form. It's not like other forms of abuse. There's no hierarchy of abuse, in my view, but there are different reasons for all of them happening. Now, if we say, let's look at everything rather than this, you'll ignore the reasons why this abuse happened. It's true that child sexual exploitation and group-based abuse isn't the vast majority of cases, but it is a form of this exploitation that hasn't been dealt with properly in part because, unfortunately, people are far too keen to zoom out and look at everything else other than this crisis.
Brilliant, Charlie. Thank you so much.
And I think what we know about Louise Casey, Baroness Casey, she will not pull her punches.
It's going to be rigid.
Yeah, and she will go straight for the racial Pakistani origin argument. She takes it.
She did it in Rotherham in 2015. I think she's going to do it again.
And the heroine of all of this story as well, Maggie Oliver, is going to be on the show this morning. Thank you so much.
Still ahead, farmers under increasing pressure, not just from the family's farm tax gifted them by this government, but from major theft. We're going to invest the true cost of rural crime on Britain's farmers.
But up next, also, should childcare be something that you can claim on your tax return if you are a self-employed mother? Would it make a difference to you?
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews travel destinations forecast.
If you're jetting off to the Mediterranean this week, there will be plenty of fine conditions, quite widespread sunshine out towards Greece and the Aegean. A few showers to watch out for in places. They may develop into thunderstorms, but they're being driven because the temperatures are really set to soar. Particularly across Iberia, we could see a heat wave developing with inland areas seeing temperatures close towards 40 degrees Celsius by midweek, and that heat will transfer to France later on.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews travel destinations forecast.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now imagine this. You spend your entire life dreaming of public service. You work your way up to become the Director of Public Prosecutions. You then become a Member of Parliament, and just next to your constituency is a world-famous museum hosting
I'm imagining it, Tom.
waxworks of famous figures, and you dream that one day you will be featured in this mausoleum, for want of a better word. You become Prime Minister and you think, now, finally, my waxwork will be on display at the world-famous Madame Tussauds. And then they say no.
And then you find out that Theresa May has one.
Oh.
Yes, so Madame Tussauds, there's Theresa May. There she is in her suit.
Yeah,
she was always one for colourful outfits.
Theresa May has a waxwork there, so does Boris Johnson, of course. It's reasonable to expect the Prime Minister would have thought that he would join the likes of David Cameron, Theresa May and Boris Johnson with a waxwork.
Winston Churchill. Yeah. Winston Churchill has one. Harold Macmillan apparently was previously displayed. Tony Blair.
Of course.
Tony Blair, of course. But apparently, so Madame Tussauds can't be sure that he'll still be relevant in 5 years' time. That's the reason.
Is that why they've said it? No.
They can't be sure, so they don't want to put the money into it, presumably.
Wow.
I could imagine Keir Starmer commissioning his own.
And yet, Lord Salisbury had a waxwork, the Marquis of Salisbury, Harold Macmillan and David Lloyd George, of course. But the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland...
Think about this.
...does not have a waxwork because he's not relevant.
A spokesperson told the Metro, "We have no current plans to make a figure of the British Prime Minister."
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Charlie Peters has some breaking news for you about the Casey review.
Yes, so Baroness Casey's report, we understand, will call for local inquiries with statutory powers to then feed into a national body.
Statutory powers means that they can require witnesses.
They can compel witnesses and can compel evidence. This has been a major criticism that we've heard of local inquiries in previous years. The Rotherham, Rochdale, Oldham and Telford local reviews were all done basically by people coming forward of their own volition, choosing to contribute. But we understand that Baroness Casey's report, when it comes out later today, will call for local inquiries with statutory powers, which will then feed back into this national judge-led inquiry.
Harder to control the timing, then?
Yes, it will be, and there are lots more details to be thrashed out by the Home Office on this.
50 towns. Is that 50 local inquiries?
Well, we don't know which areas have been suggested for this, but we do know some of the survivors who've been meeting with the Home Office officials and Jess Phillips, the Safeguarding Minister, in recent weeks and months on this. I'm hoping that Bradford's on that list because there's one survivor we know from that town who's been campaigning very aggressively for many years alongside the Tory MP Robbie Moore for a local investigation into Bradford, which has always resisted an inquiry.
Astonishing if it's not.
Robbie Moore has always demanded a Rotherham-style investigation into Bradford. He might now get something completely different, something far stronger. A local inquiry with statutory powers, people dragged in front of an investigation, feeding into a national level.
All right, Charlie. There'll be more of that. As soon as we get that Casey review report, we'll bring it to you on GB News.
So, moving on now, businesswoman and former apprentice candidate Michelle Nitziol is calling on the government to let self-employed people deduct childcare costs from their taxable profits.
She believes it will tackle economic activity, narrow the gender gap in entrepreneurship and help more parents launch and grow businesses.
So is this a smart move or is it something that parents should just be expected to pay for? Let's talk to Michelle now. Good morning, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us. So, listen, as a mum who over the years has paid extortionate costs for childcare, whilst also being self-employed, I want to cheer this from the rooftops. But what's the response been that you've heard?
Overwhelming support for the cause, which has been absolutely incredible. So thank you for your support also and for having me on the show to raise awareness. Obviously, there's been a little bit of, misunderstanding and obviously people wanting to understand a little bit more, which obviously, I'm more than happy to answer the questions.
Can you tell me why, though, you want self-employed women to have a financial advantage over a woman maybe who works in a factory and has to pay for childcare but will not get this financial advantage?
Yeah, it's not a financial advantage. Basically, I'm trying to level the playing field here. So as an employed person, you do obviously get access to the same rights as a self-employed person. However, as a self-employed person myself, when I had my 2 children, I literally could only have 2 weeks off work and then I was straight back to work, and purely because I wouldn't have had a business to go back to. So my point here with the campaign is that as a self-employed person, although on paper we have the same rights, is that actually going to happen? So, could we take 9 to 12 months off work? Whereas as an employed person, you can have all that time off with your children and, have a lovely time bonding.
But isn't that a choice you've made, Michelle? Michelle, isn't that a choice you've made?
You could say it's a choice I've made, but also we do need, as a country, we do need self-employed people to contribute to the economy. So we can't be shutting down. I'm trying to encourage here people to start and scale businesses.
There are so many barriers at the moment, Michelle, to starting a business. I mean, I can't think of a time really when I would be less inclined to want to put potentially my house on the line, my savings on the line to start a business when it feels like things can be just so difficult. But how much of a difference would this actually make to people, do you think, who are parents, as opposed to, let's say, bringing down national insurance or helping with business rates for premises, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it would be absolutely phenomenal. I think it would, if someone was teetering on the edge of thinking about starting a business, I think that that's going to help them get into entrepreneurship. And I think those who are already in business, I think that that's going to help scale their businesses. So, as the Rose Review states, if women had the same chances as men to scale businesses, we would be £250 billion a year injected back into the economy.
So should it just be for working mothers or should it be working parents?
Yeah, no, the petition is definitely for working parents. It's not just for women, it is for everybody. However, obviously, you know, we are aware that the majority of the childcare is given by women currently. So we are pushing the women element, but no, it is definitely for all parents.
You've got a woman Chancellor of the Exchequer. Do you think that's going to make any difference?
You got what, sorry?
A woman Chancellor of the Exchequer for the first time. Do you think that will make any difference?
Yes, I do. Yes, thank the Lord for that. But yeah, no, I am hopeful that that is going to make a difference.
And have you had any response from any MPs at the moment, Michelle? How are you trying to get this across their desk?
Yeah, so I've reached out to my local MP, who is Callum Miller. And so the petition has only just launched the last sort of 3 weeks. So we're currently on the campaign for more media exposure. We've got a photo shoot booked and a national social media takeover for the 25th of June. So just trying to raise as much awareness as possible.
Great.
We need to get to this 100,000 signatures.
Thanks. Thank you, Michelle. And we need to get to a break. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say weather.
Weather next.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. The first half of June has been quite changeable, but there are signs now that things will be settling down more widely, and it's all because of this area of high pressure that wants to build its way in from the south. There are a few weather fronts just moving over the northern edge of that high, and so we do still have some outbreaks of rain for western Scotland today, generally turning lighter, and there will be quite a brisk breeze around as well. But for the bulk of everywhere else, there will be a decent amount of fine, dry conditions and some sunny spells really poking through any of that fair weather cloud that does bubble its way up. The sunshine does mean that we are seeing high pollen levels, if not very high, across some regions. That is also due to the temperatures really starting to climb. We'll see highs around 25, 26 degrees Celsius across parts of the southeast. Even 22 degrees is possible for areas of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland, where we see the sunshine managing to poke through some of the cloud that will spill its way in during the day. The rain always quite close to northern areas of Scotland, and we are going to see another pulse push its way in during the evening and into the overnight. This could turn heavy for a time, with some stronger winds developing as well, potentially close to gale force strength around some of the exposed coastal areas. That will then slip its way into parts of Northern Ireland as well come dawn tomorrow morning. But it'll be a mild night for all of us, temperatures comfortably holding up in double-digit figures. As we move throughout Tuesday, we'll just watch as that rain band slowly pushes its way southeastwards, but it is going to weaken as it does so, and the rain certainly will turn quite light. There'll be some sunny spells developing behind that for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but the most prolonged sunshine will always be down towards the south and east, and temperatures here will again quite readily climb towards that 26 degrees Celsius mark, but feeling fresher now in the northwest, where we see them more around mid to high teens. But it won't be long before those temperatures climb back up again, because with high pressure becoming more dominant widely across the UK, it's a settled week to come. Bye-bye.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good morning, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Due to a broken down vehicle on the M8 eastbound, restrictions are in place between junctions 17 and 16, so drivers should allocate more travel time. The M4 westbound is closed between junctions 47 and 48 for maintenance, with diversions ensuring traffic flow. The M18 southbound has a lane closed between junctions 4 and 3 due to an accident, causing a 30-minute delay. And on the trains, disruptions affect East Midlands Railway between Leicester and Kettering, and London's overground routes from Stratford to Richmond and Clapham Junction. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Monday the 16th of June, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
This government, frankly, did nothing. Our priority all along was to, and it continues to be, to deliver justice for the victims and their families and get to the bottom of what happened.
So the government's ordering a sweeping police operation to hunt down abusers alongside a major new national inquiry. But will victims finally get justice? We're expecting that Casey review any minute now.
Well, GB News can reveal that Baroness Casey's report will call for local inquiries with statutory powers feeding into a national investigation. We understand that that will mean that people will be dragged in front of those investigations to give evidence for the first time. And later on this programme, we'll be joined by Maggie Oliver and 2 brave survivors to give their take.
And stop the press. Most people in Britain think this country is in decline. It's a new poll that's found that over 3/4 of us are worried about political violence.
6 nights of consecutive violence in Northern Ireland. More protests planned for this week. What will the Northern Ireland government do to address people's fears over immigration?
And £44 million lost in just 1 year. We're going to go behind the scenes, see how crime is devastating Britain's farms and anything done to stop it. And that's even before the new tax comes in force.
And after the events in India last week, the tragic events, we're going to be talking to the passenger who was the sole survivor of a Vietnam Airlines flight 474, which crashed in 1992. Annette Hefkins survived 8 days alone. How did she endure the unimaginable? And what might she say about the events, the British guy who survived last week's crash?
Blood, sweat and sacrifice, the stuff success is made of, but in today's Britain, is striving to get ahead something to be celebrated, or is it something to apologise for? We're going to debate that.
And we have survivors of grooming gang abuse in the building now. They're going to be talking to Charlie Peters in just a moment to give us their reaction to the news that there will now be a statutory national inquiry. A lot to get through this morning. First, though, here's your news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Yes, more on that breaking news with Charlie Peters shortly, but the Home Office is expected to release its report by Baroness Louise Casey into grooming gangs. The Prime Minister says the findings convinced him to announce a full-scale national inquiry. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is expected to give a statement to the Commons over the report this afternoon. Sir Keir Starmer is under increasing pressure to apologise after he U-turned over the weekend, previously resisting calls for a national inquiry. That comes as Pakistan is demanding its national airline is allowed to fly directly to Britain in exchange for taking back convicted rapists. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says it's a humiliating U-turn from the government.
Been forced partly by the imminent publication of the Casey report, but they've also been forced by the vote that we had scheduled on Wednesday of this week to set up a proper independent statutory inquiry. And because they were scared of that vote, they thought a load of Labour MPs might agree with us Conservatives and vote with us. They've decided in a panic to all of a sudden do this U-turn. Keir Starmer doesn't believe in this. We know what he really believes in, because back in January, when this first came out, Keir Starmer smeared campaigners and people like me. He called us far right for calling for an inquiry. That was a disgraceful smear, and now he's just 6 months later doing exactly what we asked for.
Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Emma Reynolds, says the government are committed to delivering justice for victims.
Prime Minister was Director of Public Prosecutions, and he acted 10 years ago in that position on these issues. He was the first to take a prosecution to grooming gangs. We have set out now a proper plan. We've listened to what Baroness Casey, who at the start of her review didn't think there needed to be a national inquiry, but has since uncovered gaps. We have supported the setup of local inquiries. The last government, frankly, did nothing in the time they were in office on the 20 recommendations that she put out in 2022. So we are forging ahead with urgent action here to deliver justice for the victims.
In other news, strikes by Israel and Iran continue as the conflict between the two countries intensifies. At least 8 people have been killed in Iran strikes across central Israel overnight, with dozens of people injured, according to Israel's National Emergency Service. Israeli media reports that some of those were Ukrainian nationals, including children. The Israeli military says it killed 4 senior Iranian intelligence officials, including the head of the IRGC intelligence organization. Yesterday, Israeli strikes killed the chief of Iran's Armed Forces Intelligence Unit. There are reports that US President Trump rejected a plan by Israel to kill Iran's supreme leader. It comes after the Home Office advised against all travel to Israel, and a red alert saw an Israel-bound flights cancelled. Donald Trump has promised an imminent ceasefire between the two nations, but Israel says it has no intention of peace while strikes are ongoing. G7 allies will discuss the Israel-Iran conflict as well as the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Leaders will be discussing the prospect of more sanctions on Russia if Putin continues to resist calls for an unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine, Sir Keir Starmer says. The Prime Minister said targeting Moscow with further action would undoubtedly form part of talks at the international summit unless the Kremlin engages in peace talks. Ukraine's President Zelensky is expected to attend that conference in Canada, where leaders from the world's major economies are meeting for talks on global security. Zelensky has accepted a US-backed ceasefire proposal and offered to talk directly with his counterpart in Moscow, but the Russian leader has so far shown no willingness to meet him. Law enforcement officials say a man has been taken into custody 2 days after a US politician and her husband were shot dead in Minnesota. Authorities have urged the public not to approach 57-year-old Vance Boatler, who they warned could be armed and who was reportedly posing as a police officer. A manhunt was launched on Saturday after Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman were shot dead at their home in Minneapolis in what Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called a politically motivated assassination. Police said the same gunman that killed the Hortmans had earlier shot and wounded Democrat Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette at their home 9 miles away. Bolter was arrested last night and faces 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder of the Hortmans. And MI6 will be led by a woman for the first time in the Foreign Intelligence Service's 116-year history. Blaise Metoeli, who joined the Secret Intelligence Service in 1999, will become the 18th chief of the organisation and take over from Sir Richard Moore later this year. She's currently responsible for technology and innovation at the service and said she was proud and honoured to have been asked to lead. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called the appointment historic at a time when the work of our intelligence services has never been more vital. And those are the latest headlines for now. More from me at 10:30.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It is 10:08. Andrew and Bev with you until midday.
Now, a new poll, it doesn't surprise either Bev or I, shows that most Brits believe that Britain is in decline. 76% of us, though, did surprise me, fear political unrest and even violence.
And those fears come amid violent riots, of course, in Ballymena in Northern Ireland. They've left dozens of police officers injured and the area largely destroyed in some cases, particularly the local leisure centre.
Let's talk to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, this report comes on the back of sustained riots over, 6 days in the province?
It does, Andrew, and it's very sad reading because really what is at the heels of this is they are putting undocumented immigrants into areas of high deprivation. There is a group here called Mears. 85% of their properties are in socially deprived areas, and those areas are now kicking back because in amongst those areas you have pensioners and so forth that have bought their houses back in the 80s. I spoke to a couple of them that were having to be moved out by their grandchildren, put a Union Jack in the window because they were fearful of their properties being burned out. But also in these areas are illegal activities from migrants that have came there. In that particular street in Ballymena, there were 2 brothels. People could have possibly been trafficked into those areas. And the amount of young women not going out in the town is completely insane because at nights they're coming back down through the town and being harassed by migrants that are asking them to come with them and following them the whole way down the town. So the pub trade is suffering because of this. The economy of the areas are suffering because of this. And the areas, no harm to anyone, are absolutely filthy and costing the ratepayers of not just Ballymena a lot of money to get rubbish cleared up off the streets, never mind the rats and vermin that are going through it. And these are all things that are not being reported by what we would call mainstream media. And this has built up into an absolute powder keg that basically exploded in Ballymena last week. They then took those migrants out of there and placed them into a town 30 miles away in Larne, into a leisure centre as a sort of an iPass centre, a help centre for them. The people that shouldn't have found out about it on the Tuesday, not the Wednesday as has been reported, and on the Wednesday the leisure centre was burnt. Then word came through that these migrants were going to Portadown, which is miles away from Ballymena. And over on Thursday and Friday night, I seen 2 riots that were absolutely vicious, totally vicious. And what we have is failed policy from in behind here. People saying that they're racist right-wing thugs. The police coming out and saying the same. The police budget's being stretched. Officers are going to be hurt, and young people are being arrested because of failed government policy.
Fascinating, Doogie. Thank you so much.
Well, let's talk to the director and founder of the polling company behind this, Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, morning and welcome to you. By the way, before we talk about this report, congratulations, because this is the first report, I think, by your new company, Merlin Strategy.
Oh, thank you very much, Andrew. That's very kind.
You are a rare voice in the world of polling because, if I may say so, having written about polling companies for years, very few polling representatives are women.
Oh, yeah.
So well done and keep up the good work.
It's actually quite unusual, surprisingly so. But yes, I'm a woman.
It is. And so what have you found then, Scarlett, in this fascinating poll about how people feel about the UK?
Look, this poll was fascinating, but it was also actually quite depressing. So we found a British public that overwhelmingly thought that Britain is in decline, that Britain is already broken. And astonishingly, and I think the bit that caught a lot of people's attention was that 3 in 4 people are worried about the potential for political violence in the country. Now, I do want to caveat this. This is just a poll of GB, because no doubt if you poll people in Northern Ireland, they'd be thinking about the violence that is already happening there. But we were just polling Great Britain.
And Scarlett, what is underlying it? We know what happened in Northern Ireland was to do with the effects of rapid mass migration. Is that a major factor today in why people see it we're in decline and also fear the outbreak of violence? Because we saw what happened in Southport was earlier this year.
So I think the backdrop to these sorts of concerns is quite nuanced and quite complicated, but you can definitely point to parts of the running of the country that we know that people are not happy with. I think first thing to say is that people are worried about their living standards. They think they've declined. And actually, strikingly, in a different part of the survey, we found that 4 in 10 people feel like they were worse off since the COVID pandemic. That was actually particularly pronounced amongst reform voters. But overall, people are very pessimistic about their personal finances and their cost of living. So I think that's a huge driver. We also know that people aren't happy with the government's handling of immigration, and actually going back to that question about what's affecting people's living standards, which I think is a much better way of getting at how people are feeling about things like the economy. People perceive, including Labour voters, including a sizable chunk of Labour voters, that immigration has had a negative impact on their living standards. And I do think we're starting to see that filter through into pessimism about the country as a whole.
Where does the fear of the violence come from, though, Scarlett?
The fear of the violence, I think we didn't ask specifically where the fear of the violence came from, but you get a sense from the rest of the questions that we asked about what is provoking what is underlying their sense of misery. And again, I think it comes back to their top concerns facing the country. That is a concern that the economy is not doing well for them, a concern about levels of migration, and a concern about the state of public services. And I think when you factor those together, you come up with quite an unhappy population. I think that's where the concern is, because I think people out there can tell that other people are not very happy.
And interesting that the younger people, particularly, Scarlett, feel they can't afford the house that they want and they will have a worse standard of living than their parents. That's a very, very damning indictment on any society.
It is a damning indictment, and I think it feeds into the sense that the country is broken. And why that's important is not just because young people feel that way. It's hugely important that young people feel that way. And I think a lot of people reading some of those statistics would be very shocked. And actually, we looked into things like the amount of young people using buy now, pay later services to meet everyday costs, about young people skipping meals, and all of those findings were deeply shocking. But it also matters for parents. I've done lots of focus groups with people in actually pretty wealthy areas, outside London, in commuter belts. And they think the country is broken because their grown-up children, their children in their early 20s that they thought were going to have at least as good a life of them, if not better, are stuck at home. And I think that is feeding into the sense that the country is not working very well for its citizens.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant as always. Thank you so much, Scarlett Maguire there from Merlin Polling.
I'm not surprised, are you?
No, not at all surprised.
And
not at all surprised.
Cost of living and services disintegrating, and a factor in all of that is the effect of mass immigration.
And huge inflation as well. And you feel like the politicians have just got the fingers in their ears going, la, 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 not listening. We're just carrying on as we are. Same old, same old.
Now, a new report shows farmers are being forced to incur millions. In fact, last year, the damage to farms from crime, £44 million.
And that's on top of what is already a difficult time, of course, for many farmers, given the government's recent family farms or inheritance tax being imposed upon them.
Let's talk to our reporter, Sophie Reaper, who's at a farm in Warrington. Sophie.
Good morning to you both. You're joining me this morning. I've been put to work here in the bean fields at Aston Grange Farm in Cheshire. This is what they're growing, just some of the many crops that they grow here at this farm. And joining me now to talk about this report this morning that rural crime is down by 16.5%, but as you rightly say, it is still costing our farmers millions and millions of pounds. So joining me now is Andrew, the co-owner of this farm. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us once again. We're talking this morning about rural crime. Now, this is, as I say, just one of the many fields that you have here at Aston Grange. And of course, to tend these fields, you need quite a lot of expensive and specific machinery, which of course has been targeted in the past by rural crime. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, so we have the GPS systems on the tractors, which enables us to do a lot of different things, really. So one of them is to actually sow the crop to start with, and because margins are so tight nowadays, we need this technology so we can just pluck out what's left of any margin that we can get. So we don't want to be overspraying, we don't want to be over drilling. We need everything as precise as we can. We soil map the whole farm. and then we basically work off that system, which is all linked into a GPS system, where we will vary the seed rate, we'll vary the fertiliser, which is good for the environment and keeps everyone happy, and only target specific chemicals to go on these crops. So when these thefts occur, which have occurred here quite a few times, and we can't get on to tend to our crops with a chemical or a fertiliser or something like that, it's a massive knock-on effect, which could have a knock-on effect on yields. It can let disease spread across such a vast area because we can't get on it on time. So yeah, there's the cost of the GPS system, and then there's the cost of the growing crop as well, and to ourselves.
And of course, so there's the impact on your profits, but one of the other big things that the NFU is talking about is the impact on farmers' mental and physical well-being. 96% saying it's having a huge impact. Of course, it's also been a difficult year with the government imposing with the inheritance tax. Have you ever just thought in the last year about chucking the towel in, genuinely, because you just feel it's not worth it anymore?
Well, yeah, because a farm of this size, years and years ago, there'd be a lot of people working on the farm. Nowadays, you're isolated. You're one man in a cab, on your own, with your own thoughts for the day. So when things are going wrong, certainly with the way the government are treating agriculture at the moment, they just think, you know, we're just not wanted by them. And you can turn this off, but you can't turn it back on. And if you turn agriculture off, so when you're on your own all day, I'm thinking, well, why am I doing this? The only reason why I'm doing it now is my son. You know, he's 18 and he's got a real passion for it. You saw his calves in the shed before. That's all his own doing. He set up the livestock enterprise. But it does make you question, is it worth doing? Until, you know, you see George's face and how he loves it, and then you've got to think, well, no, we've got to battle on. Hopefully sometime in the near future, Mrs. Rachel Reeves, will have a rethink about inheritance tax. All I will say is, if any of them are watching this morning, let us make a profit. Go back to the supermarkets, look at the margins they're taking out of the crops that we grow, and let them tell them just to start sharing it back to us, because at the moment it's all one way. It's all one way.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I think this is something that here on GB News we've heard now for many months, the impact on our farmers, the difficulty that they're going through right now. Of course, rural crime is not helping any of that. So it's good news that it's gone down, but it's still, as I say, costing them millions every single year.
OK. Thank you so much, Sophie. Sophie Reaper there.
Who appears to have a poppy coming out of
it.
It's
a lovely poppy.
Lovely poppy.
In her ear.
Is that a poppy, Sophie?
It is indeed. I'm getting back to my rural roots, Andrew. I thought, why not? As I'm in the field. You can't see, I've got my wellies on under here.
Is it grown on the farm?
Yes.
Lovely. Oh, there they are. How
there they are.
That?
I'm so glad we clarified that, because for a terrible moment I thought maybe that was just Sophie's accessory of the day and we were about to embarrass her.
We thought her hat had fallen off.
Thank you. Look at the beautiful puppies there.
Thanks, Sophie. Still ahead. Is success now a dirty word in Britain? I think it might be. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
French authorities first seized the Lady T, and that's an Eastbourne-based fishing vessel. And next, they fined its skipper, Philip Edwards, €30,000 to release his boat. Now, the Lady T, operating legally under UK jurisdiction, was intercepted by a French patrol ship near the Somme Bay. Now, the incident has sparked massive outrage among British fishermen and is renewing calls for the government to stand firm against French overreach in national waters. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joining with Charlotte Edwards, who's the husband. Husband Philip is the skipper of the Lady T and is out fishing right now. Charlotte, welcome to the show. I've got to say, here at GB News, we are hugely supportive and appreciative of British fishermen and fisherwomen. do a fantastic job. So if you're nervous about the interview, please don't be. I want to ask you how on earth this happened. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, for example, that the Lady T didn't have the correct paperwork, it was fishing illegally, and the French decided to pounce. What's the reality?
The paperwork just slipped through. It was an admin error. The other two boats had the permits, and unfortunately, his didn't at the time. He wasn't in as far in as they said he was. He was about 800 metres in their water. He wasn't near the 12-mile.
He was intercepted by the Pluvier. That's a French Navy ship. No, by the way, the sort of French Navy ships that just seem to give an escort to illegal dinghies coming into British waters, suddenly pouncing into action. The only boat they've managed to stop seems to be the Lady T.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
10:23, Britain's Newsroom with Bev and Andrew.
Well, a nice panel this morning. Different panel.
Well, they're often nice.
Well, most of the time. I'm a Bogle. You're Matthew Talbot. I don't think you've been together. Have you?
Oh, yeah, a few times.
Yeah. On this programme?
Butted heads and whatnot.
On this programme?
I think you've had
couple of times.
Yes.
I've just not been here. Not been with it. Never
Maybe
mind
you were away,
me.
Grandad. Though.
Yeah. Don't about me.
Right. Shall we talk about what is potentially impending World War III, she says casually. Are we getting a kind of war fatigue, it feels like, Armand, doesn't it? Like, we're looking at events over in Iran and with Israel and thinking, no, this can't be what it could potentially be, surely.
Look, I think, first of all, it's very important to realise that between the borders of the UK and the borders of India, Israel is the only real free democracy, where you've got the EU in between. I mean, they're not really a free democracy, and that really matters.
That's controversial.
And that really matters because, you know, this is a country that is founded on the same principles as us: freedom, liberty, democracy, and is defending those ideals. So, Iran, I mean, look at it this way. It's a threat that has festered on for so long. We saw it under Biden. They appeased them, they gave them money, and they let them try and build that bomb. And it's only coming back to bite us in our collective global security. And you know what? We saw the same thing happen about a month ago when we had the India-Pakistan stuff happening. It was the same. These are two big global fountainheads of terror, both Iran and Pakistan. And guess who they're backed by? They're backed by the North Koreans. They're backed by Turkey. Just last night, what came out of Islamabad? That if Israel takes out Iranian nuclear facilities, that Pakistan would launch a nuclear bomb at Israel.
I doubt that would happen, but it's talk.
But it's talk. And it just tells us that if we let these issues fester for so long as they have been, ultimately they will have to be dealt with. And my goodness, Israel and the US, supported by the UAE, don't forget, supported by the Saudis, they are finally dealing with this threat.
So you're on board then with Netanyahu?
Well, indeed. It has to be dealt with. It has to be nipped in the bud. And you know what? What we saw happen in Pakistan, there was a lot of talk that Pakistan could end up launching nuclear missiles over on India. But the way those very surgical pinpoint strikes happened on Pakistan nuclear facilities, taking out
by India.
By India. They didn't take the nukes out, but they took out the capacity to operate those bases. Yeah. And that's what Israel is trying to do.
Matthew, I was thinking this. If Britain had a country which is developing rapidly nuclear weapons, and this country was dedicated to eradicating us off the world map, would we not be doing what Israel's doing?
Possibly, but I think this is more than about the nuclear weapons. This is clearly more about regime change, and you can tell by the targeted nature of it. It's one thing taking out the nuclear bases and where they assume things are going on. It's another to start taking out leadership and individuals, very, very targeted. And actually, we heard reports over the weekend that President Trump had to kibosh an attempt on the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, which would have caused, all sorts of... It's a mess. I appreciate Israel is in a tricky situation. I think what they've done is they've realised that Iran's proxies are sort of weaker at the moment than they ever have been when you look at the mass.
And of course, so the response of the bombings, it's been power cuts, fuel shortages, people can't bake bread in baker shops. They're hoping that it could lead to such civil unrest, it topples the mullahs, but it could go the other way. It could solidify support for the mullahs.
It could, and the only thing with that is it all sounds very nice in theory. In practice, what we tend to see in the Middle East is not a proper plan for afterwards. I'm not aware, and I don't think anyone is aware of a sort of day after plan if the Ayatollah is toppled. And Israel in particular, I don't think they've got a day after plan for getting rid of Hamas and Gaza, let alone...
Israel's not there to go and occupy Iran. Iran has its own...
I didn't say that.
Well, then what do you mean? A plan for the day after? Israel's not there to plan for the Iranian people. The Iranian people themselves have been celebrating on.
But isn't Matthew's point the Supreme Leader goes, an even bigger monster takes his place?
Well, that's always a risk, but we cannot allow these absolute, Islamist terrorists to continue building a weapon that can end up destroying so much of the region. Look at how much progress has been made by the UAE and Saudi to bring peace, prosperity and normalcy, to bring the Middle East into lockstep with the rest of the world. To allow the mullahs of Tehran to take that back, I think, would be an abomination.
But Trump was a matter of days away from negotiating, wasn't he, with Iran, to try to come to some sort of resolution.
Would it have got anywhere? And don't forget, we've had the International Atomic Energy...
Netanyahu checkmated him now, hasn't he?
But the International Atomic Energy had said, for the first time in 20 years, they were censuring Iran because they'd given no access. Because they're also getting closer and closer.
I think this has also happened because Politico were reporting at the weekend the Israelis didn't think any deal Trump would negotiate would be essentially any good. And they've never trusted the Iranians, and probably, with good reason. Totally.
But Netanyahu has put Trump in a very, very difficult position.
Well, yeah, because if you're the Iranians, you're going, do we believe you didn't know? Trump sort of dropped the ball in last week saying, oh, yeah, we knew something was going on, whereas Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said, no, we're nothing to do with it, because they don't want to really get involved.
Trump wanted people to think he's in the loop.
Exactly.
Because our own Prime Minister was not in the loop.
Yes, but now we're involved.
I don't think he's in many of the loops. I mean, let's be honest. President Trump fought on an election campaign of America first. That doesn't mean America alone.
And a peacemaker. Fought the election because he was going to come in and cure
and peace comes through strength, and the only language that the mullahs of Tehran understand is strength. The same for any Islamists. We saw the terror attack in Pahalgam by the Pakistani terrorists. The only language they understood was those 3 days of taking out those bases and terror.
Just to go to headlines, Starmer he can't suck Britain into this. We're stepping up, putting more military aircraft in the region, but that presumably is to protect bases like our Cyprus military base, which is only 250 miles from Israel.
That'll obviously be why we've scrambled jets, and otherwise I think that will be the priority of keeping anything British safe. I think the problem is, again, if the Iranians don't believe it and they go, we're going to strike it, we're going to test you, we're already involved. I think people need to come to realise we are involved, America is involved, we have Russia now involved who have said to the Ayatollah, we can evacuate you if you're targeted again. This is totally global and something people need to realise.
I think the main solution will come from within the Middle East. We've seen serious efforts from the Saudis and the UAE to try and, build the force that is needed from within the Middle East to defend peace and prosperity. And I think that's what will happen.
OK, Aman Bogle, Matthew Talbot, you'll be back in the next hour. First, though, headlines. Tatiana's here.
Beth, thank you. The top stories. Yes, the Home Office is expected to release its report by Baroness Louise Casey into grooming gangs today. That's after the Prime Minister says the findings convinced him to announce a full-scale national inquiry. Sir Keir is under increasing pressure to apologise after he U-turned over the weekend, previously resisting calls for a national inquiry. That comes as Pakistan is demanding its national airline is allowed to fly directly to Britain in exchange for taking back convicted rapists. Strikes by Israel and Iran continue as the conflict between the two countries intensifies. At least 8 people have been killed in Iran strikes across central Israel overnight, with dozens of people injured, according to Israel's National Emergency Service. Israeli media reports that they were There were Ukrainian nationals included, and including children. Yesterday, Israeli strikes killed the chief of Iran's Armed Forces Intelligence Unit. There are reports that US President Donald Trump rejected a plan by Israel to kill Iran's supreme leader. It comes after the Home Office advised against all travel to Israel, and a red alert saw all Israel-bound flights cancelled. Donald Trump has promised an imminent ceasefire between the two nations, but Israel says it has no intention of peace while strikes are ongoing. And G7 allies will discuss the Israel-Iran conflict as well as the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Leaders will discuss the prospect of more sanctions on Russia if Vladimir Putin continues to resist calls for an unconditional ceasefire, Sir Keir Starmer said. The Prime Minister said targeting Moscow with further action would undoubtedly form part of talks at the international summit unless the Kremlin does engage in peace talks. Ukraine's President Zelensky is expected to attend the conference in Canada, where leaders from the world's major economies are meeting for talks on global security. Zelensky has accepted a US-backed ceasefire proposal and offered to talk directly with his counterpart in Moscow, but the Russian leader has so far shown no willingness to meet him. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More at 11.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3584 and €1.1729. The price of gold is £2,516.93 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,884 points.
Done. My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Still ahead. Is success now Is success now a dirty word in Britain? If you're racing to the office this morning like Sylvester Stallone there, maybe you should just slow down, because apparently in this country we don't like people to make money or keep any of it.
And by the way, Bev's got a crush on Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, I really do not. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. The first half of June has been quite changeable, but there are signs now that things will be settling down more widely, and it's all because of this area of high pressure that wants to build its way in from the south. There are a few weather fronts just moving over the northern edge of that high, and so we do still have some outbreaks of rain for western Scotland today, generally turning lighter, and there will be quite a brisk breeze around as well. But for the bulk of everywhere else, there will be a decent amount of fine, dry conditions and some sunny spells really poking through any of that fair weather cloud that does bubble its way up. The sunshine does mean that we are seeing high pollen levels, if not very high, across some regions. That is also due to the temperatures really starting to climb. We'll see highs around 25, 26 degrees Celsius across parts of the southeast. Even 22 degrees is possible for areas of Northern Ireland, central and eastern Scotland, where we see the sunshine managing to poke through some of the cloud that will spill its way in during the day. The rain always quite close to northern areas of Scotland, and we are going to see another pulse push its way in during the evening and into the overnight. This could turn heavy for a time, with some stronger winds developing as well, potentially close to gale force strength around some of the exposed coastal areas. That will then slip its way into parts of Northern Ireland as well come dawn tomorrow morning. But it'll be a mild night for all of us, temperatures comfortably holding up in double-digit figures. As we move throughout Tuesday, we'll just watch as that rain band slowly pushes its way southeastwards, but it is going to weaken as it does so, and the rain certainly will turn quite light. There'll be some sunny spells developing behind that for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but the most prolonged sunshine will always be down towards the south and east, and temperatures here will again quite readily climb towards that 26 degrees Celsius mark, but feeling fresher now in the northwest, where we see them more around mid to high teens. But it won't be long before those temperatures climb back up again, because with high pressure becoming more dominant widely across the UK, it's a settled week to come. Bye-bye.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists should be aware that the M4 westbound between Junction 47 at Penlegar and Junction 48 at Hendy is closed due to planned maintenance, with diversions in place. Additionally, a road traffic incident on the M18 southbound between Junction 4 and Junction 3 in Doncaster is causing significant delays, with one lane closed and travel times extended by approximately 1.5 hours. And on the trains, East Midlands railway services are experiencing disruptions between Leicester and Kettering, and there are no trains running on the London Overground between Stratford and Richmond or Clapham Junction. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
So it's reported at the weekend the government may bring back part of the Equality Act known as a socio-economic duty.
Oof. If enacted, it would require public bodies to factor in class and income when making key decisions, from allocating funding to prioritising services.
So in other words, it means money will go from middle-class areas to poorer working-class areas, and this is something that Gordon Brown's Labour government tried to do, but it hit the buffers because a change of government, the coalition, saw it off. It could be back.
So, as pressures growing on public services, is it a long overdue correction or a sign that success has become a dirty word?
Let's talk to the businessman who you know very well, this programme, Charlie Mullins, and anarchist and working-class academic Lisa McKenzie. Lisa, are you an anarchist?
Yes, I am, yes.
Right. What does that mean exactly?
I don't believe in power that is sort of hierarchical. I believe in sort of local councils. I am anti-Westminster and anti sort of centralised power and government.
Right,
It doesn't mean that I go off I don't burn things down. I'm a political anarchist.
OK. Charlie, is this move by the Labour government all about, frankly, we just want to move resources to where we think most voters are for the Labour Party?
Yeah, I mean, it's just penalising successful people again. Why would you do that? It's discriminating anyhow. You've already got cases where, you know, private education have got to pay VAT. Private education people are not getting appointments at dentists or doctors. So why would you penalise successful people? What they should be doing is putting more money into areas to get the lazy sods off of benefits and into the workplace. That's what should be happening.
Lisa, your response, please.
Right, so the word success, what we often forget with that word success is we think it's something about individual merit. You know, we never believe that it's something about perhaps the way that resources are used. So I think that this measure, where we start to look at where there's certain groups of people, especially in poorer areas. I come from a working class community in the mining communities in Nottinghamshire. We have had no resources, and we've had all our resources stripped away from us for 40 years. So the idea that if you live in an area that has had lots of resources and you've got money and you've got a voice and a platform, that you get all these resources, but somehow the people who have had none are not successful. Your success has come through, I suppose, a government and or structural system that has benefited you unfairly. And those disadvantages are also unfair. So you've got two things happening in society: unfair advantages and unfair disadvantages.
But where do we factor in hard work and aspiration into that? Because we're both probably all four of us in this debate, we're all state educated. Yeah. None of us went to private school. And we've all done well in various ways. Why? Not because the government gave us a hand up, but because we had the right family values behind us, to work hard, to believe that nobody was going to give you a handout. Don't we need to get back to that mentality with a smaller state, Charlie?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you said it exactly there. We're making out like the new generation and think it's a terrible thing to go to work and contribute to society. We wouldn't have all of this problem if more people like got up, went to work and contributed instead of draining the economy. So we're sending out the wrong message to youngsters here, saying you don't have to work hard. It's a dirty word. We're looked on as if we're causing the problem. The money is coming from businesses and hard-working people, but you're looked on as a bad person because you've been successful, because you've made money. I mean, you've only got to look at my social media and the haters that are out there just because you're built a company, employing people, training people, paying loads of tax, and you get all these busybodies that have got nothing else to do but sit at home and ponce off the country. And I have to be blatant about it because somebody needs to change the system and stop giving people...
Go on, Lisa.
There are other groups of people. There are other groups of people who ponce off the system as well, because you know we've got a rentier class that actually do absolutely nothing. Their only I suppose asset or value or success is they had enough money to buy lots of property, and now what they're doing is they are
Lisa, hang on. Let me jump in. Landlords are not all bad.
No, they're not. But what
Well, you seem to be saying that you're deriding the whole renters class.
No, I'm not. What I'm talking about is rentier capitalism, which no longer looks at hard work and talent. The rentier capitalism is just about people who have got enough resources. So you've got a rentier class. That doesn't necessarily mean all landlords, but we've got a rentier class who also ponces off the system as well. So
Many people come off council estates with no money, they start a company up or they go to work and they do well. So you've got to come away from this nonsense that, you know, don't work and successful people...
Nobody's saying that. I come from a mining community. No one works as hard as my people.
You're encouraging people that going to work, being successful is a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Hang on, Lisa, your words. Lisa.
Not at all. What I'm saying is we need to address these inequalities, because there are disadvantages that working class people face every single day, which means that success becomes harder for them. Equally, we've got advantages that people have unfairly too. And what I'm saying, I think me and Charlie probably would agree on a one-on-one, working class people suffer massive disadvantages in this country. Class is one of those things that we don't talk about enough.
I agree with you, because I often think when we have the DEI conversation and we're talking purely about skin colour, we talk about giving it a leg up if you're black, you're Asian, or or you're gay even. But actually, a lot of those issues are about kids being poor. It's sort of secondary that they're that they're black even, I would say. But it's about being poor. But just comment a bit on that, Lisa, in terms of the way we've messed up the DEI debate.
Of course we are, because what we did, 10 years ago, I was brought into Parliament as an expert to talk about what is happening to working class people and whether working class people should be acknowledged as a group with disadvantage. You know what they came up with? They came up with some nonsense about, oh, it's actually poor white working class children have got no aspiration. They didn't ever accept that there were structural disadvantages. It was always about individuals not having aspiration. And guess who they thought had no aspiration? White working class kids. What did we find out last week? White working class kids are doing worse at school than any other group. Why is that? Because there is no support for that group.
Yeah, there is support. Of course there's support out there. I mean, there's loads of people that are trying to get people into work. It's the benefit system is causing the problem. I mean, here Labour are coming up with ideas of more rubbish collections in poorer area, more libraries. I mean, it's absolutely pointless. You know, the main thing they should be... Well, no, but the main thing... Sorry?
We're going to have to, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to let it go there, I'm afraid.
Anyhow.
Fascinating as it is. That's
Thanks,
Charlie
guys.
Mullins and Lisa McKenzie. First time I think we talked to Lisa. I hope she comes and speaks to us again.
Yeah, right. Up next, the King and senior royals will mark Garter Day. But what does this ancient ceremony really mean? Oh, there he is.
Looking fabulous with his white plume.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're jetting off to the Mediterranean this week, there will be plenty of fine conditions, quite widespread sunshine out towards Greece and the Aegean. A few showers to watch out for in places. They may develop into thunderstorms, but they're being driven because the temperatures are really set to soar. Particularly across Iberia, we could see a heat wave developing with inland areas, seeing temperatures close towards 40 degrees Celsius by midweek, and that heat will transfer to France later on.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, Britain's News Channel.
News channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Today's Garter Day, which is the oldest order of chivalry founded by King Edward III way back in 1348.
Do you remember that? Now, the annual parade will see the royal family attend a service in St George's Chapel today.
So let's talk to the royal commentator, Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, before we talk about Garter Day, you would have been aware on Saturday at Trooping the Colour, there was an extraordinary amount of Republicans. What were they saying?
Not my king.
Not my king. And as people left to walk down the Mall, they went first. Of course, Sadiq Khan, who was knighted by the king, got his knighted from the king last week. He's the Police and Crime Commissioner, must have signed off on all of that. Is it a sign, do you think, that Republican is on the up, or they're just getting a bit more organised?
I think that it's publicising itself in a very different way. I do think that after Queen Elizabeth's death, we expected that there would be a certain number of, a certain percentage of Republicans, that there would be perhaps a few more. What has happened, I think, and I've been looking at the polls in recent years, since Harry and Meghan left as senior working royals, and since their attempts at sabotage in various ways, which you're well aware, the 18 to 24-year-old group is at the moment in the majority in the Republican camp. So I think it's a great pity. There's no reason that it should be in any sense permanent, but it is something that we ought to keep an eye on.
And of course, the King and Queen do their best, but they are nearer 80 than 70, and perhaps young people in that age group, Richard, 18 to 24, don't feel they can relate to them.
No, I think you're right, and I think also there are only 4 working members of the royal family under 70, and it's just something. I mean, obviously there are ups and downs, and issues dealing with Andrew, say, have certainly not been helpful. But again, I think there's also been overall a very great deal of sympathy for what the royal family and health issues are going through at the moment. And yes, Queen Elizabeth was absolutely unique in many ways, and Republican support tended to be around 20%. It's considerably more than that now, but again, mainly among younger people at the moment. On the other hand, you simply don't know. If you look at the voters, as you will have, I mean, this is one of the most fluid and flexible times. I've never seen anything quite like it. So it's something that they're finding new ways of publicising themselves. Whether it's dignified or not is quite another matter.
In times of significant change, I think it's great that we hang on to some of our traditions, Richard, and today is the oldest order of chivalry. It's Garter Day. What does that mean and what will happen?
Well, firstly, as Andrew mentioned, it goes back to 1348 and Edward III. It's the premier order of chivalry. It's limited to 24 knights who've given service to the monarch or to the country. And most specifically, it includes members of the royal family as a separate number of, a large number of members of the royal family are members, but also there are stranger knights, and they are usually foreign royals. So it's a magnificent and unique ceremony, and a lot of members of the public, I would wish it was televised, the service, because a lot of people aren't aware, other than controversies over whether Andrew is in the procession and so forth. It begins with the monarch investing, if there are any new members, in the throne room at Windsor Castle, and subsequently there's a lunch, and then there's this magnificent procession, and the robes are amazing. I mean, you wear a Tudor bonnet with an ostrich and heron plume and this sort of thing. It may sound antique.
Richard,
fascinating.
It is fascinating, and thank you so much for joining us, Richard Fitzwilliams there. In just a minute, we're going to be talking to one survivor from the Vietnam Airlines crash. Don't go anywhere, Brittany.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's going to turn hotter, increasingly so this week. For the time being, it's fine for most with some warm spells of sunshine, but cloud and outbreaks of rain will be running into parts of Scotland during the rest of Monday, with these weather fronts toppling in over the top of an area of high pressure. It's this high that is going to build through the upcoming week, however, and bring an increase in temperatures day by day. For the time being, that high pressure bringing plenty of fine weather through England and Wales, decent spells of sunshine, although some patchy cloud around. Thicker cloud for Northern Ireland, a keen breeze here, and for Scotland. North of the central belt, that cloud bringing outbreaks of rain, making it feel on the cool side. But away from the cloud, it's going to be a warm afternoon with temperatures widely in the low to mid-20s. Nevertheless, as we go into the evening, those outbreaks of rain remain across the Northern Isles, the Outer Hebrides, into northern parts of mainland Scotland, 1 or 2 spots of rain further south. But for the central belt, a bright end to the afternoon. Northern Ireland, 1 or 2 showers into the north and the west, sunny spells for Belfast and the south and east. England and Wales, however, seeing the lion's share of sunny skies heading into the evening with plenty of fine weather. In fact, any cloud tends to disappear as the evening progresses. But the cloud across Scotland tends to thicken, and outbreaks of occasionally heavy rain push into western and then eventually central and southern parts of Scotland. Northern Ireland also seeing some outbreaks of rain, but elsewhere a lot of clear skies, allowing some fog to form across southern parts of England. That will soon disappear, though, during Tuesday morning, and then another fine day is expected in the south and southeast. Thicker cloud for parts of Wales and northern England. Outbreaks of mostly light rain. Showers following for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also some bright spells. And then temperatures rising. 26, 27 Celsius possible. It's going to turn even hotter by the end of the week.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£54,321 cash could be yours. Cash that you could spend however you like. It's like having an extra £1,000 each week for a whole year to play with. Someone is guaranteed to win this amazing amount of cash, so make sure that someone could be you. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dawdley, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 11 o'clock on Monday the 16th of June, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
This government, frankly, did nothing. Our priority all along was to, and it continues to be, to deliver justice for the victims and their families and get to the bottom of what happened.
So the government's ordering a sweeping police operation to hunt down abusers alongside a national inquiry. But will victims finally get justice? We are expecting that major Casey review any moment.
Well, the government is promising justice for the victims and survivors, but can they trust this government and their new inquiry? We'll be joined by Maggie Oliver, the Rochdale whistleblower, and brave survivors Chantal and Jade in the studio shortly.
And is Britain in decline? A bombshell new poll has found that most of us think it is, with over 3/4 of you worried about political violence on the streets.
£44 million lost in just 1 year. We're going to go behind the scenes to see how crime is devastating Britain's farms and can be anything done to stop it.
And an amazing sole survivor story. Vietnam Airlines Flight 474 crashed into a mountainside in 1992. But one woman, Annette Herfkens, survived 8 days alone with no food and only rainwater. How did she endure the unimaginable, and her thoughts on last week's survivor of the Air India crash?
Blood, sweat and sacrifice, the stuff success is made of. But in today's Britain, we're striving to get ahead, something to be celebrated or something to apologise for.
love to hear from you this morning. gbnews.com/your say. We will look at your messages right now, in fact, because Tatiana Sanchez is here with your headlines.
Beth, thank you. The top stories. The Home Office is expected to release its report by Baroness Louise Casey into grooming gangs today. The Prime Minister says the findings convinced him to announce a full-scale national inquiry. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is expected to give a statement to the House of Commons over the report this afternoon. Sir Keir Starmer is under increasing pressure to apologise after he U-turned over the weekend, previously resisting calls for a national inquiry. That comes as Pakistan is demanding its national airline is allowed to fly directly to Britain in exchange for taking back convicted rapists. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says it's a humiliating U-turn from the government.
Been forced partly by the imminent publication of the Casey report, but they've also been forced by the vote that we had scheduled on Wednesday of this week to set up a proper independent statutory inquiry. And because they were scared of that vote, they thought a load of Labour MPs might agree with us Conservatives and vote with us. They've decided in a panic to all of a sudden do this U-turn. Keir Starmer doesn't believe in this. We know what he really believes in, because back in January, when this first came out, Keir Starmer smeared campaigners and people like me. He called us far right for calling for an inquiry. That was a disgraceful smear, and now he's just 6 months later doing exactly what we asked for.
Economic Secretary to the Treasury Emma Reynolds says the government are committed to delivering justice for victims.
Prime Minister was Director of Public Prosecutions, and he acted 10 years ago in that position on these issues. He was the first to take a prosecution to grooming gangs. We have set out now a proper plan. We've listened to what Baroness Casey, who at the start of her review didn't think there needed to be a national inquiry, but has since uncovered gaps. We have supported the setup of local inquiries. The last government, frankly, did nothing in the time they were in office on the 20 recommendations that she put out in 2022. So we are forging ahead with urgent action here to deliver justice for the victims.
And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news in half an hour.
So Britain's Newsroom this morning with you until midday, and the Home Office is expected to release its report by Baroness Louise Casey into grooming gangs imminently.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's under increasing pressure to apologise for previously resisting calls for an national inquiry. Remember, Labour voted against one as recently as January.
Well, our national reporter, Charlie Peters, who has done tireless work on this issue, is in the studio with former Detective Constable for Greater Manchester Police, Maggie Oliver, and grooming gang survivors Jade and Chantel for their reactions to this news this morning. Charlie.
Thanks, Bev. Thanks, Andrew. Yes, it's brilliant to be joined by Maggie, Chantel and Jade this morning, joining us in the studio ahead of this landmark report coming out. Chantel and Jade, I want to start with you both, please, for your reaction to what's been announced over the weekend, this judge-led inquiry. Are you confident this is going to happen, Chantel?
No, I feel like we'll get so far into it, things will get covered up. They're not going to be truthfully honest in any of it, you know. There's no reason for this national inquiry. Put the recommendations in place, what we've already spent a lot of money on, you know. I just feel like we're going around in the same circle.
And Jade, a lot of people think that the previous inquiry didn't look into this issue properly, just a couple of weeks looking at grooming gangs. There's never been an inquiry where you're from, in High Wycombe, for example.
No, never.
So are you hoping that people might now be forced to give evidence and get justice when they haven't previously?
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping it does do something, but I hope there's no faith there. There's literally no faith at all with them.
Because you've both been let down so many times, isn't that right, Chantel? And
yeah.
Just to give our audience an understanding, I think, you know, even though it's been many years of this channel and many others talking about this issue, people still don't understand truly how horrific this is. Could you share your story with us, please, Chantel?
So I was 11 years old in the care of the local authority, Manchester Social Services. I was in numerous children's homes. I was abused from the age of 11 up until the age of 15. I've been fighting throughout all my adult life for justice, you know. I feel like I'm never going to see justice.
And even now with this inquiry, you're not confident because the authorities have just failed to help you so many times?
Yeah, just feel a huge letdown.
I'm so sorry. And Jade, could you share your story with us, please? Because what you endured is quite unique insofar as you were criminalised yourself.
Yes, it started when I was 14. They'll get you drunk, take you to hotels, take you to taxi bases, and just pass you on and on through their whole family. And then I got put on police protection, untold times, for high-risk sexual exploitation. And then 18 days after, the last time I got put on it, I got arrested for actually being a perpetrator. So it's like a victim, 18 days later, perpetrator.
And I think it's clear, it's important to say, Charlie, that what happened in those 18 days was she turned from 15 to 16. So suddenly she goes from a victim to a perpetrator. Nobody took action when she was a victim. A little girl who was being raped on a daily basis. Suddenly at 16, she's an easy target. She went to prison. You know, she can't go on school trips with her kids. She has to sign on the sexual offenders register. She was a child. Sorry, I just had to clarify that point.
And Maggie, you've been working with survivors for decades now. First as a police officer, as a detective constable, when your senior officers at gold-level meetings were ripping up reports and ignoring this issue, and now, after doing your whistleblowing as a campaigner who supports them, Jade and Chantal, their stories are not isolated.
No.
We're aware of hundreds, thousands who've had this experience.
Yeah, in our charity, the Maggie Oliver Foundation, we've helped nearly 5,000 in the past 6 years. Jade and Chantal are examples of hundreds of children that I have spoken to, which was why I resigned. So, and I've been banging this drum for years. So we get an announcement today as though this is something brand new. It's not brand new. And Keir Starmer knew. The government knew. I've just heard the Shadow Home Secretary. He was in, you know, the Conservatives were in government for years. This is a party political football. This is not a political football. This is children's lives.
Jade and Chantal, I think you're some of the bravest women that this channel's ever heard from. But today, as you bring forward your bravery and challenge the authorities on this, do you feel as though politicians are using your stories as a bit of a football to have an argument and saying, we did this, we did that, you failed, when actually they should just be bringing you guys forward?
They should be working their best now to make things right and get justice, like, for us, you know. I feel like they all knew what was going on. The police, social services, people need to be held accountable. I want to see police officers charged. I want to see social workers charged. I've had my childhood ruined. I am now an adult and I'm still going through the same. I'm hurting. Like, it's traumatising. I just want to say to people that abuse me, locked up, you know. What is so hard about going out? You know who they are. You've arrested them. I've picked them out an ID page, you know, they should be in prison. I'm living my life, like, every day struggling, it's an ongoing battle, yet they're living their normal lives out there. Why am I suffering and they're not?
It's just the most horrendous experience, and it's a life of suffering, as you say. But last night the government said they'll give survivors the opportunity to reopen closed cases. They said they found over 800 since January. Are you going to take on that opportunity? Do you think that more survivors...
I wouldn't recommend anyone. The pain, the lies, the trauma, everything they put you through, it's not worth doing. If I could go back 6 years, I would not have started working with him if I knew this is what I was going to have to do. How much longer am I going to be working with Greater Manchester Police to get justice? 6 years?
I mean, I want to clarify there, Charlie, that Chantal was a victim on Operation Augusta in 2004 and 5. That case was closed down because the Gold Command Group, as you just said, closed that down. They just decided they wouldn't put resources in, and that's the official findings. Chantal was reapproached in 2019 by the new investigation, Operation Green Jacket, that they were forced to reopen. 6 years on, Chantal is still waiting for her abusers to be charged. Another 6 years of her life, and she was told last week it's going to be at least another 9 months before the CPS see it. It might be 4 years before it gets to trial, if it ever does. That's another 10 years of her life that she's lost.
The process is so slow, it does not put survivors at the forefront and their experiences. So what do survivors like Chantal, like Jay, what do they need?
Well, you know what,
forward?
Charlie, when they're announcing the NCA, OK, empty words, a PR exercise. those officers in the NCA, in the police, they're on their knees. There are not enough. There are no resources. The government are backed in a corner. They know that the cat is out the bag. They're empty promises, and actually promising survivors and victims they're going to reopen 250, 500 cases. Where are they going to get the officers to do it? So they're not doing victims and survivors any favours. They're going to put them in the position that Chantal is in. So unless you put money in and resources and training and commitment, this is just, hot air. And I have heard these promises so many times that I am sick and tired of it. But what I would say is that Baroness Casey came to me.
Yes.
I met her in February. Sceptical, I've been there, I've spoke to everybody, but she really impressed me. I spent 2 or 3 hours. She knows that I call it as it is, and yet she came back and she asked me to bring together a group of survivors. These 2 girls were 2 of those, and that's why her report has been delayed, because she listened to 10 people. She was virtually in tears when she heard these stories. That's what those at the top need to hear. So I want to see Baroness Casey leading this inquiry. I don't really have any faith in it, but with her at the helm, I think we all felt that she listened. Am I right?
I feel like Louise Casey, she did listen to us, and but I don't have no faith.
Fine.
I don't.
And Jade, so many survivors we've heard, they've come forward and they've actually been worried that they'll be called racist due to the ethnicity of many of the perpetrators. You're extremely brave because, like Chantal, you're public. Is that something that's made you want to hold back in the past before?
No, it's got nothing to do with race. Everyone knows that there's white people, all races out there that do horrible things to young people.
Absolutely.
But we're trying to say our experience, it all happened by that one race.
By Pakistani men.
British Pakistani men, yeah.
I mean, what I would say there, Charlie, is that the Maggie Oliver Foundation today is issuing judicial review proceedings against the government to implement the 20 recommendations of the last national inquiry. One of those recommendations, none of which have been put into place, is that we gather ethnicity, religion, culture, profession of every sexual offender. That is desperately needed. That's the first thing.
And that's something that Baroness Casey has been capturing, and we might see that this afternoon.
I really, really hope so. I've put my faith in Baroness Casey. I will be devastated if she doesn't do these girls justice. I do believe she will. I spoke to her on Saturday. I don't know everything that's in the report, but, things like a Minister for Children in the Cabinet, that's not going to cost money.
Absolutely, yeah.
No paying compliance of children. That's what I'm calling for to start with.
Jade, just very quickly, what would you like to say to the Prime Minister on this announcement today?
I haven't actually got any nice words to say, because he should have done it in January instead of saying it was far right. Why now?
Why now?
Just because Baroness Casey has put a report out and you feel like you have to.
Why didn't he come to us and say, I've watched a documentary, what would you like? He hasn't.
Yeah.
It's like we're nothing to him,
Yeah.
We're here, we're trying to make it known, we're trying to make awareness, we're trying to get justice, What's he doing? Another inquiry when he's not going to put nothing in place? Come and speak to us, see what we want to do.
Well, there are many more survivors to hear from, and your voices, I think, will be central as we go forward and really hold feet to fire on this, because as this inquiry is launched, I know that GB News will be absolutely on top of it, making sure that what you guys want to see and what the many women and girls around the country want to see in this inquiry is at the centre of it. Maggie, Chantal, Jade, thank you so much for joining us on GB News.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, well, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has released this statement. She said that the vulnerable young girls who suffered unimaginable abuse at the hands of groups of adult men have now grown into brave women, isn't that right? They're with us today, who are rightly demanding justice for what they went through when they were just children. Not enough people listened to them then. That was wrong and unforgivable. We are changing that now. Well, that's the voice of Yvette Cooper, but will survivors trust them? Back to you, Bev and Andrew.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you also, of course, to Chantal, Maggie and Jade there. Right, still to come this morning, we're going to speak to the sole survivor of the 1992 Vietnam Airlines crash. This is Britain's Newsroom. Only on GB News, we're interested to know what she thinks of the experiences that might be ahead for the sole British survivor of the Air India tragedy from last week. Don't go anywhere.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, part of a Soviet-era spacecraft stranded in orbit for more than 50 years will crash back to Earth today.
Yes, Cosmos 482 launched in 1972 on a mission to Venus, but it failed to escape Earth's orbit and broke into 4 pieces.
Well, now experts are closely monitoring its re-entry, but where it will land remains a mystery.
It was due to land in, what is it, about
Less
40 minutes now?
Yeah,
Not long to
like.
go till we find out. Well, earlier we spoke to space expert Andy Land. He told us what makes this spacecraft different to the others we've seen previously.
Currently, it's over the South Pacific, so it's heading towards South America. The odds are really unlikely. The chances are it's going to crash into the ocean, to be quite honest. Other parts of this fell into the Pacific Ocean, although in the early days when it got into the wrong orbit, of course, the lower sections of it actually crashed into New Zealand and landed in a field. But no, I think you got more chance of being struck by lightning or winning the lottery than actually being hit by a piece of this material. The only interesting thing about this mission, of course, it is a Venus atmospheric entry probe, which means it's designed to survive entry through a dense atmosphere. And in particular case, Venus's atmosphere is more dense than the Earth's atmosphere. It's designed to withstand fantastic temperatures, absolutely fantastic temperatures, huge pressures. So this piece will hit the ground or hit into the ocean. That's what makes this a very different creature from previous satellites which have broken up, which normally they just break up into pieces. This is designed to actually come back. And in case people think, well, wouldn't the parachute system operate? It's unlikely the parachute system is operating at all after half a century. So it's going to be a ballistic drop.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain you love, for the communities you live in. That's what makes us the fearless champions of Britain. Its voices and its values. Because we, at GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev, and we have Aman Bogle and Matthew Torbett back in the studio with us. Right. Presenters falling out on breakfast shows doesn't happen around here, Aman, let me tell you.
No, I didn't know if we were talking about you two or somebody else.
We're not on the breakfast show.
Yes.
We're not on the breakfast show. That's held by much more illustrious presenters than us. Nobody could ever say Bev and I have had a crossword between us.
No, which can't be said for Charlie State and Naga Munchetti, who
apparently.
This is
the BBC together. Yes, this is front page of The Sun.
Yeah, they've been rocked a little bit, and they're also putting a bit of the blame on the new editor, Richard Fridiani, who I'd not actually heard of before. He's apparently had quite a quick promotion, and there are sources close to him that say it's gone to his head and he's acting in a tyrannical sort of way, which is quite the word.
That's the word
quite
well.
an accusation.
I'm not getting involved. Don't even thump me between you. I do wonder, though, 3 of the grievances that have come in against him specifically...
Against the editor, though?
Yeah, and I wonder, are people being a bit wet and a bit mad? It says he shouted at someone when mistakes were made, which, you know, listen, it's not nice, but if he's a bit old, well, that's how it is. He walked out of the gallery, the production gallery, and kicked a bin. Not at anybody, but kicked a bin. You're looking at each other going, you've seen all this before.
No bins around.
The one that concerned me, it said last year he allegedly physically shook a lower-ranking female editor, which I don't think is appropriate.
That is not good.
Did he physically shake her, or did he say something which made her physically shake?
Apparently
because there's an important difference.
Well, no, that's a good... No, he allegedly physically... No, I think he really has shook her.
Oh, well, that's quite...
No good.
You can't do that.
Look, he isn't here to defend himself. I think we need to be really clear about that.
A junior male...
No, true, yeah.
No.
I mean,
it's a bit strange that it's the front page of a newspaper, though, isn't it? A small sort of corporate HR issue. Is it because it's the BBC?
Yeah. No, I think maybe partially, but also because the BBC is so much as a national institution that, you know, I mean, who can forget that back in, I think, 2007, when they had a miss shot of the late Queen Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. Senior head's role, because just that small clip was out of sync. Gone are those heady days, you know, when you could sit on a shortwave radio and listen to BBC World Service as a voice of authority and reason. I mean, look at the BBC of today. You've had the same BBC put out this thing called the fake grooming scandal documentary, disparaging the real crime of the rape gangs. They put out the Hamas propaganda as this Gaza documentary.
Yeah, that's appalling.
And Doctor Who went woke. I mean, it's become this heaving mess of the metropolitan liberal elite.
And let's remind people, they're alone amongst broadcasters around the world who do not call Hamas terrorists.
Well, there you go. So I think it's absolutely right that these things should be on a national front page, because people ought to know about it.
And we're paying for them.
After all, we're paying for it.
And literally everything they said during the pandemic was completely wrong.
Well, that's true as well.
Let me also just give you the BBC statement, though, of course, they say, while the BBC says it will not comment on HR, human resources issues, a BBC insider has said the welfare of employees takes priority and the BBC's code of conduct sets out clear expectations.
As it does here, our code of conduct.
As it does here as well.
Which I know you've read from cover to cover.
Well,
I have a little copy of it in my back pocket. Right, now, shall we move on, gentlemen? What about this? NHS drugs are going to be more expensive under the trade deal. This is a serious story, because
really
already our pharmacists are struggling so much. Aman, let's come to you on this then.
Sure. I mean, I think if you look at the nitty-gritty details on this, it's more to do with weaning off the West from Chinese drug supplies, rather than buying specifically expensive American drugs for the UK. So I think there's a lot of geopolitical strategy in this from Washington and President Trump. After all, these same Chinese drugs, most of them, well, many of the time, can be not up to the mark. And of course, it also undermines Western capacity to produce our own drugs, because they're dumping them so cheap in the West. But having said that, I think it's fair to say that, once again, the NHS ought to be looking very seriously at getting more of their medicines and drugs for a better bang for our buck from India with their generics industry. Let me give you an example. One single paracetamol tablet bought from the US is 10 pence per tablet. Same tablet made in India is 2p. So I think that's where we ought to be looking, certainly with the UK-India FTA that we have under our belt.
Interesting. Matthew, what do you make of this? Because I think there's a lot of sense of what I was saying there, but I talk to my local pharmacist all the time, and I go in and she has a list of drugs. She says, this is what we're buying them for, and this is what the government are refunding us, and it will be the end of chemists and pharmacists as we know it.
And they're closing down at a rate of knots too.
No, they are.
Particularly the small independent ones.
Yeah, no, totally. I think this is disappointing. I'd like to remind viewers that some of us were part of a very unpopular Labour opposition that brought this up in the 2019 election and literally compiled a 451-page dossier that was rubbished at the time by Boris Johnson and the Conservative government, that the NHS was not on the table, when 451 pages showed it absolutely was on the table. The trade representatives in the US specifically were asking about whether prices would be on the table, patents, and it was laughed off as a scare story. I think, again, to give an example a bit like Aman's just done, if you were to get a packet of Humira, which is for autoimmune disorders and which many people take in this country, it'll cost £1,409 here, which is a lot of money. And that's what the NHS will subsidise. If you were to get it in the US, it's nearly $8,500. And this is the thing. And Trump, I believe, a bit like he's done with the tariffs, from the talk that's coming out of Washington, he says he wants to see parity. He feels like America's been being ripped off for years.
But West Street and the Secretary of State for Health and Stum have repeatedly said that the trade deal that they're doing with the US will not impact in any way. They won't be able to get their hands anywhere near the NHS. This would be a big political problem for Labour.
Of course it will. And they've always wanted their hands in the NHS. This is totally... We showed this through the leaked documents.
Maybe it might turn a page if the Americans did get their hands a little bit on the NHS. You know, the efficiency that the American system works with. Look, the private insurer side of things is a separate matter. The clinical outcomes in the US are far, far better than we have in the NHS. So it's about time the NHS was, put up to competition,
Which is, of course, you pay a premium for, bear in mind. Those on
Look,
Medicaid
we already
and
pay
elsewhere,
through our nose £3 billion a week that we spend on the NHS.
Nowhere near the amount that Americans pay. Nowhere near the amount. And it's very much a system before the 1834 Poor Law, and what followed the NHS is those that have do all right, those that don't die. That's simple. That's
well,
simple
right now the NHS
and now they're making
unfit for
cuts
purpose.
to Medicaid, which are in the billions in America. Not a system we should be following whatsoever. It's not to say the NHS is in a good place. The NHS, I feel, is actually third rate at the moment, and that's totally open to competition. But I think to follow the US down that rabbit hole, absolutely no chance. Worst thing we could do.
What about? Should we talk about this? Do you want to talk about the grooming gangs story this morning? Because it's on our list here, Keir Starmer. It's being called a U-turn. I've always said that on this issue, whatever Maggie Oliver wants, Maggie Oliver should get. Nobody understands this topic better than Maggie Oliver.
Indeed.
And I have to say, I'm sad this morning to hear Maggie say, we don't want another national inquiry. We know what the problems are. I kind of said that at the start of the show because I suspected that would be Maggie's take on it. We know who the perpetrators are. We know where the blame lies. Go and knock on doors and get it all sorted, Matt.
I think you have to listen to survivors and those involved.
Yeah.
Some do want it, some don't. I suppose that's the issue. It annoyed me that it took the government so long. I think I appeared on this show 6 months ago when it all come to fruition again, and I said, just grant it. It's so obvious you're going to have to sort of give in on this, and it's about doing the right thing. The other thing I'll say, which I think
They've moved just before that vote on Wednesday, haven't they? Which is breathtakingly simple.
Yeah, no, but this is what they do. There
was a vote on Wednesday on a national grooming gangs inquiry. Labour were going to be whipped to vote against it.
I know.
Great gift for the Tories and reform. So I suspect they've got Casey's report out sooner rather than later. Still hasn't been published, by the way. So they can hide behind that and say, oh, actually, we support it now.
Yeah, but that's not what Maggie wants.
No,
anyway.
I know. No, it's not what she wants. Either way, I think what everyone could agree on, Maggie alluded to it, I think Jay did as well from Manchester, it's time we didn't hear from the politicians anymore.
Yeah.
The main focal point of this has always and should have always been about the victims and justice. And what's happened is an establishment, as it always does, has colluded together to cover up and save itself. And it's about time things like that are put on the shelf.
Yeah.
And you hear from victims and those affected and those that have literally gone on a systematic rape of this country's children are held accountable and serve a very long time in prison. It's a
If I was,
long
you know
way.
what a win for Keir Starmer would have been say, do you know what, Maggie Oliver? Here's your damehood, and frankly, sort it out. You're in charge. I will give you whatever powers you need. You're a former police detective. You know all these girls. You know all these stories. Make it happen. Why won't you do that?
You know what? Because this is a very weak illywecker of a Prime Minister.
What do you call him?
Illywecker.
An illywecker?
An illywecker is Australian slang for a small-time conman.
I like it.
I've heard that before.
Well,
Matthew, you're supposed to dive in and support your Labour Prime Minister here. No response.
He's got nothing.
Well, I mean, look, for Starmer, political convenience is more important than, moral clarity. And that's the bottom line of it. I think Keir Starmer owes the nation a real apology for one very simple reason. Previously, he went on air and he said anyone who calls for this national inquiry is jumping on the far-right bandwagon.
He did say that, yeah.
And that's what he really means about looking into this great national scandal that is the Pakistani rape gangs. He ordered his MP 3 times to vote against the national inquiry. Look, in my opinion, the time for a national inquiry is long past. What we need now is re-election, knocks on doors, prosecutions, and we had the start of that happening with the rape gangs task force under Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman when she was Home Secretary. They had 500 arrests.
Yeah, and there's people have to lose their jobs as well.
Exactly.
Because those people who turn their eye, who are still in positions of power in social services departments, and presumably, and perhaps are still doing it now.
Everyone from the local authority departments who were part of this cover-up right till Islamabad, because we saw this morning PIA wants its flights back in return for deportations. They're refusing to take back foreign criminals back in Pakistan. Right from the local councils, right up to Islamabad, everyone has to be held to account.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, boys. Thank you so much.
What, just remind us that word again.
Illywecker.
How do you spell it?
I-L-L-Y. Wacker, W-H-A-C-K-E-R.
Got it.
Wacker, that's a great
Thank the Aussies for that.
Yeah, we thank
to be seen in Andrew Pearce column next week.
We thank Australia for many, many things.
Aman Bogle, Matthew Tormey, thank you so much. Right, Tatiana Sanchez is here with your very latest news headlines.
Bev, thank you. The top stories. The Home Office is expected to release its report by Baroness Louise Casey into grooming gangs today. That's after the Prime Minister says the findings convinced him to announce a full-scale national inquiry. Sir Keir Starmer's under increasing pressure to apologise after he U-turned over the weekend, previously resisting calls for a national inquiry. That comes as Pakistan is demanding its national airline is allowed to fly directly to Britain in exchange for taking back convicted rapists. Strikes by Israel and Iran continue as the conflict between the two countries intensifies. At least 8 people have been killed in Iran's strikes across central Israel overnight, with dozens of people injured, according to Israel's National Emergency Service. Israeli media reports that they were Ukrainian nationals and including children. Yesterday, Israeli strikes killed the chief of Iran's Armed Forces Intelligence Unit. There are reports that the US president rejected a plan by Israel to kill Iran's supreme leader. Donald Trump has promised an imminent ceasefire between the two nations, but Israel says it has no intention of peace while strikes are ongoing. G7 allies will discuss the Israel-Iran conflict as well as the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Leaders will discuss the prospect of more sanctions on Russia if Vladimir Putin continues to resist calls for an unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine. The Prime Minister said targeting Moscow with further action would undoubtedly form part of talks at the international summit unless the Kremlin engages in peace talks. Ukraine's President Zelensky is expected to attend the conference in Canada, where leaders from the world's major economies are meeting for talks on global security. Zelensky has accepted a US-backed ceasefire proposal and offered to talk directly with his counterpart in Moscow, but the Russian leader has so far shown no willingness to meet him. And an Air India Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner had to return to Hong Kong mid-flight after a suspected technical issue. The passenger jet, the same type as the aircraft involved in last week's tragedy in Ahmedabad, was bound for New Delhi but turned back after the pilot raised suspected an issue. The flight A1315 took off from Hong Kong at 12:16 p.m. and landed just over an hour later, according to tracking data. An Air India spokesperson says the airline hasn't yet established if there was a technical issue, but the pilot had suspected something. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Done.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3584 and €1.1729. The price of gold, £2,516 and 93 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,884 points. Done.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Interesting, isn't it?
Tom Harwood and a gloriously looking pregnant Emily Carver are with us. Not that you're not glorious too, Tom, but you're not blooming in quite the same way.
No, and not pregnant.
Just very...
You're always glowing, aren't you?
That's a great relief to
Particularly
everybody watching and listening.
Right, briefly.
I think we should do more vivid descriptions of each other, because we forget sometimes that on the radio as well as the television.
Tom's got a bizarre combination of a light pink shirt and a green tartan tie.
I like it.
How vividly you choose to describe us. Thank you very much.
Well, I think you are looking resplendent, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner is looking glamorous as ever.
Well, Bev just always looks fantastic, doesn't she? I think everyone can agree.
I was waiting on your adjective then. You did all right.
Glamorous. I think I could do better than glamorous.
Glamorous at 7 a.m. Right, what have you got going on the show?
Obviously
well, of course, we're waiting for Baroness Casey's report to drop.
It's taking its time.
It is taking its time. We think it's probably going to happen in the afternoon, so apologies to you two. You're not hanging in your show.
Tom, to avoid this vote on Wednesday. I'm convinced of it.
I think
there was no suggestion it was coming out on Monday last week. They rushed it out so Labour can avoid this very messy vote on Wednesday about a national inquiry, because they voted against one in January, majority of 350 against. That's what.
And it did seem that there were leaks and there were all sorts of suggestions of embarrassing Prime Minister's questions. All the suggestions were this was being planned for the end of this coming
So you're suggesting that the report perhaps wasn't quite ready?
That's quite why it's still not out yet. Why wasn't it out at 9 o'clock?
Well, they're doing the final spell checks. They're crossing the T's, dotting the I's.
Quite possibly, yes. That possibly is what is going on at this very minute.
And it will hopefully come out in your time this afternoon. We We've run out of time.
Oh, OK. Well, stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned. That and a lot more surprises to come on Good Afternoon Britain with Emily and Tom. We'll take a very quick break, but please stay with us. We'll be talking to that sole survivor of a Vietnamese plane crash to see how she thinks the survivor of last week's Air India crash might be getting on. Speak to you in a bit.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's going to turn hotter, increasingly so this week. For the time being, it's fine for most with some warm spells of sunshine, but cloud and outbreaks of rain will be running into parts of Scotland during the rest of Monday, with these weather fronts toppling in over the top of an area of high pressure. It's this high that is going to build through the upcoming week, however, and bring an increase in temperatures day by day. For the time being, that high pressure bringing plenty of fine weather through England and Wales, decent spells of sunshine, although some patchy cloud around. Thicker cloud for Northern Ireland, a keen breeze here, and for Scotland. North of the Central Belt, that cloud bringing outbreaks of rain, making it feel on the cool side. But away from the cloud, it's going to be a warm afternoon with temperatures widely in the low to mid-20s. Nevertheless, as we go into the evening, those outbreaks of rain remain across the Northern Isles, the Outer Hebrides, into northern parts of mainland Scotland, 1 or 2 spots of rain further south. But for the Central Belt, a bright end to the afternoon. Northern Ireland, 1 or 2 showers into the north and the west, sunny spells for Belfast and the south and east. England and Wales, however, seeing the lion's share of sunny skies heading into the evening with plenty of fine weather. In fact, any cloud tends to disappear as the evening progresses. But the cloud across Scotland tends to thicken, and outbreaks of occasionally heavy rain push into western and then eventually central and southern parts of Scotland. Northern Ireland also seeing some outbreaks of rain, but elsewhere a lot of clear skies, allowing some fog to form across southern parts of England. That will soon disappear, though, during Tuesday morning, and then another fine day is expected in the south and southeast. Thicker cloud for parts of Wales and northern England. Outbreaks of mostly light rain. Showers following for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also some bright spells. And then temperatures rising. 26, 27 Celsius possible. It's going to turn even hotter by the end of the week.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Bev and Andrew. Now, can you imagine being the sole survivor of a plane crash? Well, that nightmare became a reality for Annette Herfkens after Vietnam Airlines Flight 474 crashed into a mountainside during a cyclone in 1992.
What is extraordinary is Anne survived 8 days alone with no food and only rainwater.
And the sole survivor of Vietnam Airlines 1992 crash, Annette Herfkens, joins us now. Good morning, Annette. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, of course, you are on our minds because of the Air India crash last week in which Vishwas Kumar Ramesh walked away from that extraordinary tragedy. What were your thoughts when you saw that happening to him?
My first thoughts, please leave him alone. That's because I realized more than anything that he lost a brother in the crash and that he saw him dead right next to him, and that happened to me as well. I saw my beloved next to me, still strapped in his seat, lifeless, and that's really basically the biggest tragedy for him right now. That's what I thought. So in a way, I thought, please don't hunt him down.
Annette, tell us. Your own experience is quite extraordinary. I think we remember the story, but can you just remind us what happened with you?
In 1992, I was on top of the world. I had my fiance and I were going to discuss our wedding plans in a romantic resort on the South China Sea in Vietnam, where he he worked, and I was a managing director, Banco Santander in Spain. We had a romantic vacation going from Ho Chi Minh City to Nha Trang. In the 50th minute, the plane made a giant drop, people screaming. He looked at me scared. I said, well, it's a small plane, it must be an air pocket. And motors accelerating, another big drop. He grabs my hand, I grab his, we look at each other, and then everything went black.
What did you say to each other? Because if you realised you were crashing, did you?
Yeah, no time. And so that's why I always come out to speak. I come out to speak to say to the bereaved families that there is very little time in an airplane crash to realise what's happening, and there's no such thing as fear or your life in front of you. It just, before you even realise what happens. And we actually made the drop, accelerated, turned a little longer. It's just, we grabbed each other's hand, and that was it. And frankly, what I always say, the bad part of surviving an airplane crash is waking up. That's when the struggle started for me, and I think for Mr. Ramesh as well. I mean, he lost his brother. People are gonna hunt him down, ask him questions. You're destined for something special. Do you feel guilty? You must feel so guilty. It was tough. It's a tough club to be a member from. But the thing is, you don't realize at the very beginning, you just want to focus on mourning.
And have you reached out to him, or would you expect to have some conversation with Vishwas at all?
Well, I really think for him right now, he has to go through the proper process of mourning. I think there's nothing of and fending off the press. That's your priority, and everyone around him as well. It's probably they are protecting me as well. For him to realize what's happened, that takes a little time. It's only with time that you realize, that it would be very lucky accident, actually. But still, it's really it's just tough. It's a tough position to be in.
And Annette, when you were alone for 8 days with the wreckage nearby, how did you keep going?
Yeah, so I think Mr. Ramesh and I, we both chose fight, and we both chose to fight in the first instance. So did I. I got out of there. I saw my fiancé dead next to me. I must have gotten into shock because my next memory is outside on the jungle floor, surrounded by a few more people who were moaning, and next to an English-speaking Vietnamese man. And that's when I really had to start and stay in the moment and accept reality. Like, I'm not on the beach with my fiance. I have to fight. And at first, I tried to motivate the man to get some water or do something. We both severely injured, but in the end of that first day, I saw the life going out of him, and no more moaning on the mountain. And from that moment on, I was entirely alone. And
it was 33 years ago, of course, for you, Annette. Has life subsequently been kind to you since that event?
Yeah, lives keep on throwing things at you, but what I'm always saying, what I did at the time is just accept. If you accept what you don't have, if you accept your circumstances, then you can see what you do have. And I focused on the jungle, on the beauty of the jungle instead of the maggots and the stinking and the dead. And that's basically how I have approached life ever since as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Really inspiring. Thank you. Annette Hefkens there. And as she said, her first thoughts. I had similar thoughts when the plane crash happened last week, which was that everybody was celebrating that this guy had lived, that Vishwas Ramesh was alive. And all I could think was, but he's lost his brother.
He was sat next to him.
He was he was on the other end of on another aisle. So,
but I mean, and there's that whole guilt thing.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Now, up next, Sophie Winkelman's going to join us in the studio to talk about screen-demic, which affects children. And that's after this quick break.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast. If you're jetting off to the Mediterranean this week, there will be plenty of fine conditions, quite widespread sunshine out towards Greece and the Aegean. A few showers to watch out for in places. They may develop into thunderstorms, but they're being driven because the temperatures are really set to soar. Particularly across Iberia, we could see a heat wave developing with inland areas seeing temperatures close towards 40 degrees Celsius by midweek, and that heat will transfer to France later on.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, this Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The actress Sophie Winkleman is taking a stand against the screen-demic the kids of today are facing.
Thank goodness for that. She's highlighting the negative impact that smartphones can have on kids and teenagers, and she joins us now.
Sophie, welcome.
Oh, Sophie, listen, as a mum as well with kids, and the only arguments we have in our house are about phones. We've let this creep upon us without really having the conversations around the downsides, haven't we? What do you want people to be aware of?
I want people to be aware that giving your child a smartphone, I want a big revolution among parents, because I don't think we can rely on governments anymore. I want all parents to stick together and say, let's maybe not do this, because the minute you give them a smartphone, you sort of lose them, because they are designed by geniuses to be unputdownable.
And what age, is there an age, Sophie, you're pushing for?
I don't think they should get them till after GCSEs.
So that's 16?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're 16 in September, it's a bad time to get them, because then you get one just as you're doing exams.
Right.
But yeah, 16, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, how do you persuade a mum or dad? I mean, that's a battle for a mum or dad if they've already got it. What, are you going to take it off the ones they've got already or bring in a new law?
It's brutal. I think there needs to almost be a public health warning, ideally led by the NHS, saying these phones damage your children's educational well-being, their emotional, physical well-being. They are a genuine health risk.
How old are your children?
They are 11 and 9.
And so they haven't got them, clearly. And how difficult does that make life for you?
No, I caved with the bigger one, like all parents do.
You're not practicing what you're preaching.
No, I don't pretend to,
Right.
Andrew. I don't pretend to. I say
Right.
this is brutal on all of us, because they go to secondary school, every single child has
That's
got
the
one,
problem, isn't it?
and then they're the social leper, and it's almost worse. She's got a very ancient one that only texts and calls. It looks like a smartphone, so that's socially acceptable. It doesn't do anything. But it's a battle we're all facing, and I'm also fighting the fact that schools have gone very screen-heavy, and I think that's a pernicious new rise of problems that we all need to talk about as well.
So true.
That's something I want parents to feel confident enough to say to their schools, tell me how this is better than a book, paper and pen.
Because isn't it proven as well in the research that cognitively using a pen and paper will implant the information in your brain better?
Absolutely, it's proven everywhere. And a huge study a couple of years ago coming out of Sweden proved that there's clear scientific evidence that using digital tools impairs rather than enhances learning. It's everywhere. There's clinical evidence everywhere that reading a page in a book, the information goes in more profoundly. You just skim read if you read on the screen.
Is it easier for the teacher having it on screen?
I think sometimes it is, yeah. And I don't want to be anti-teachers.
Sure.
I love teachers. And I think teachers in huge state schools need a lot of help. But the problem is we're spending billions on EdTech when I think that money could go on a hell of a lot more teachers.
I sat next to somebody from a big tech company at an event recently, and he had 4 children, and I said, do you let them have phones? And he said, nobody where I live in Silicon Valley works in tech. None of our children would have phones. It is socially unacceptable.
So they impose it on the rest of us.
And I said, how do you sleep at night, was my question.
Good on you.
And I thought he was going to say, very well, in my $10 million house. But he did say, we try where possible to say that these aren't for children. We try everywhere. And I said, no, you don't.
Well,
I said, no, you don't. Your algorithm doesn't do that.
No.
They also send them to schools which don't have screens.
Correct.
They learn really long poems and they make cars out of wood chips because they know that the human capital we're going to need when AI is replacing us all is concentration and focus. And that's another thing that smartphones and online education is wrecking.
And it's going to be such a self-selecting group of the children of the technocrats will rule the future. Why? Ironically, because they don't have tech.
Exactly.
Sophie, great to see you. Sophie Winkleman. And if people can Google you and support the campaigns and get involved in some way.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, that is it from Britain's Newsroom for now. Emily and Tom are next. Here they are.
We're waiting for Dame Louise Casey to release her report onto the issue of child rape gangs, grooming gangs. What will her 12 recommendations expected be? Could it be that that police forces have to improve ethnicity data collection?
We'll be back in.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's going to turn hotter, increasingly so this week. For the time being, it's fine for most with some warm spells of sunshine, but cloud and outbreaks of rain will be running into parts of Scotland during the rest of Monday, with these weather fronts toppling in over the top of an area of high pressure. It's this high that is going to build through the upcoming week, however, and bring an increase in temperatures day by day. For the time being, that high pressure bringing plenty of fine weather through England and Wales, decent spells of sunshine, although some patchy cloud around. Thicker cloud for Northern Ireland, a keen breeze here, and for Scotland, north of the Central Belt, that cloud bringing outbreaks of rain, making it feel on the cool side. But away from the cloud, it's going to be a warm afternoon with temperatures widely in the low to mid-20s. Nevertheless, as we go into the evening, those outbreaks of rain remain across the Northern Isles, the Outer Hebrides into